Welcome to the Legal Innovation Forum's podcast series, Leading at the Intersection of Business and Law. In this episode, we welcome Heather Ancrum, Deputy General Counsel at the Atlanta Housing Authority. Heather is going to tell us about her career journey and the important role that her legal department plays in supporting the strategic goals of the Atlanta Housing Authority. Thank you for listening. Stay tuned for our next episode.
Welcome to our podcast. I'm Andrew Bowyer, the founder of the Legal Innovation Forum. Today, we're interviewing Heather Ancrum, who's the Deputy General Counsel at the Atlanta Housing Authority, the largest housing authority in Georgia and one of the largest in the United States. Heather leads and manages a team of legal professionals who provide strategic and proactive advice on a wide range of legal matters, and she leverages her expertise in legal operations, analysis, and business law to support the mission and vision of the Atlanta Housing Authority. She also spoke at our conference in September 2024 in Atlanta. Thanks for joining us, Heather.
Thank you so much, Andrew. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, likewise. Great to have you on our podcast. So let's start off with a little bit about your career path. Tell us your journey and how you ended up at the Atlanta Housing Authority.
Sure. I will tell you that my journey was a little weird getting here. I knew when I went to law school, I wanted to help people, but I didn't know what I wanted to do exactly. I knew what I didn't want to do. So when I graduated, I knew I did not want to do criminal. I was not interested in litigation. I did not want to do family law. And of course, I ended up at a small law firm where they mainly focused on criminal law. So I was kind of thrown into litigation. I actually learned a lot, but I convinced the owner to allow me to start drafting briefs for the Georgia Appellate Courts, the Georgia Court of Appeals, and the Georgia Supreme Court. And so I definitely realized I enjoyed writing. I liked the opportunity to help the lead attorney prepare for their cases. So I liked the organization aspect. I love being able to focus on analysis. And so I went from there to in-house at AT&T as a contractor. But when I was at AT&T, it wasn't exactly what I thought in-house would be. And so eventually I went to the State Board of Workers' Comp. And I worked there for quite a while. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed government. I enjoyed working for the appellate panel that I worked for because it required me to do a lot of research, writing, analysis. And so I drafted a lot of the opinions for the 3-judge appellate board. And I still felt like I still wasn't exactly at my niche. So then I went back into law firm life and I expanded my workers' comp experience to do employment law, and I loved it. I love the ability to be a proactive attorney and to help the HR directors that I provided advice and counsel to also be proactive. And so that spirit of wanting to help was still there. And so I just helped from a different side of it. But the proactiveness was something that I was very proud of. And so we focused on a lot of policy, procedures, that type of thing. And then I realized I didn't want to live my life in 6-minute increments at a law firm. And so I ended up at Atlanta Housing. And at Atlanta Housing, I wear so many different legal hats. I manage a small team that supports our HR. So we do employment law. We also support our contracts and procurement department. So we draft, negotiate contracts. I do a lot of ethics and compliance, so I do a lot of training for the agency. I support policy and other business units by focusing on ensuring we have policies and procedures in place. And of course, in the legal department itself, I've just gotten very much into legal operations and just making sure that we are where we need to be, because Legal is probably one of those areas where it seems that technology touches us last. And that has been the case at Atlanta Housing. It feels like, we've been touching on technology just as a last resort because lawyers love paper
Mhm.
and we love to hold on to things forever. And so I felt like we really needed to embrace technology. And so that's something that, in one of my hats, I really focus on legal operations at Atlanta Housing. And I'm trying to get more software in the legal department. And so I've definitely been working with our HR and our IT teams to bring some more technology for the legal department. So that was a crazy journey, but
Yeah, that's fantastic. And how long have you been at Atlanta Housing?
at Atlanta Housing about 17 years now,
Okay.
which is just under half of my career because I think I've been practicing about 28 years now, I think. I don't want to date myself too much, but but I've spent most of my legal career at Atlanta Housing than anywhere else.
Right, right. Fantastic. So tell us a little bit more about the mission and the mandate of Atlanta Housing and the role it plays in the city and what its mission is. I mean, it would be interesting too to hear how it's evolved over the years you've been with Atlanta Housing.
Yeah, it's been very interesting because over the course of 17 years, obviously I've seen a lot. We have, in fact, when I first got there, one of the things that I absolutely fell in love with as far as my role was that I found that there were a lot of reliance on paper. And so it gave me an opportunity to overhaul lots of different areas. And so I worked closely with the VP of Contracts and Procurement, and we completely overhauled the procurement process and the requirements that go along with that. So again, I was able to focus on policies and procedures. But I will tell you that over the course of the last maybe year and a half, 2 years, Atlanta Housing has really focused on what it wants to do as far as an agency and how it wants to work with the city of Atlanta, as well as other partners who provide different services to different populations in Atlanta. And so we have a 5-year strategic goal that focuses on various areas that Atlanta Housing wants to ensure that it has a great part in shaping the city of Atlanta. And so one of the things that we're doing is, along with the city of Atlanta's mayor, we are focusing on creating or preserving 10,000 housing units, affordable housing units for the city. We're also working on enhancing housing assistance resources for Atlantans that are in need. Also, we're creating opportunities for individuals, families, and children to thrive in the city of Atlanta. We're focusing on building or expanding partnerships to pool our resources in order to maximize the impact and the benefit for our families. So that means, really getting in touch with other supportive services in the city of Atlanta. And then one of the things that we've realized we don't do well is communicating the efforts that Atlanta Housing makes. So one of our strategic goals is to communicate the impact that Atlanta Housing has on the city of Atlanta and the work that we do in the city for our families. And then our sixth goal is to strengthen our operations. And so again, my love for legal operations
Yeah.
definitely fits into that aspect of strengthening the agency's operations.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so that last goal ties in very closely to focus of your role in legal operations. So to focus on a couple of those and in terms of working across different supportive services groups from a legal perspective, how has that evolved?
I think we've always worked with nonprofits in the area We've always worked with other groups that support low income housing and low income persons. But I think that we are now more focused and being purposeful about those relationships. And so we're obviously not just focusing on housing, but also providing an opportunity for our families to have kind of holistic positive impacts. And so to the extent someone is in need of, healthy foods, then we want to make sure that we're partnering with agencies that can help provide that. One of our biggest supporters or that we partner with is United Way, because United Way has access to so many different types of services in the city. And so we're just being more purposeful, more strategic about those partnerships and how we embrace them and how we're able to use them. And so the Office of General Counsel or the legal department has a role in providing those contracts. So making sure that, we're having those conversations, we're able to negotiate the types of services that we want to have, working with the various business units to talk about the types of services that we want to pair with housing, making sure that the agency itself is kind of staying in its lane of housing, but also providing those supportive services and reaching out to the resources that are out there. So, and then just as an agency, because we serve low income persons, we're often providing opportunities for our employees to volunteer. And so there are different volunteer opportunities, and the legal department definitely participates in those, as well as providing legal advice and counsel when necessary. So there are definitely lots of opportunities for legal to help the agency to continue in that vein.
Yeah, to have it had to have an impact. It's interesting too, right? That clearly that sort of mandate of working across different departments in the city and having a sort of holistic approach, which is focused on end user outcomes, right? Instead of specific department outcomes. So that's quite a different way of thinking about things, I'd imagine.
Yeah, absolutely, for sure. And it's all for the purpose of helping our families. There are so many studies that will talk about how, the lack of housing impacts education, the lack of education impacts housing, how all those things can impact, the types of jobs that you get or the opportunities that are presented to you. And so they all work hand in hand. And I think just understanding that if we're trying to help our families to become self-sufficient, it requires more than just focusing on housing. It definitely requires focusing on, food shortages and, healthy foods in the neighborhoods, education, having different opportunities, exposure to different things. And so that's something that we definitely want to make sure that we're a part of that plan, that overall plan in our families becoming self-sufficient.
Yeah, absolutely. Of those other key, areas of focus for Atlanta housing, are there any other of those 6 that you find, particularly interesting or in your role or in the legal department's role?
Yeah, so our legal department is actually divided into 3 different sections. So we have a section of attorneys and paralegals that focus on real estate. And so for that section, they're definitely focusing on creating and preserving 10,000 Atlanta housing units for our families. And so their focus is development work, making sure that our existing housing and homes are rehabilitated, they're up to date, they're maintaining those. Also, they're focusing on enhancing the housing assistance resources that are out there and working with the various partners as we're looking into neighborhoods. we want to think about not just the housing, but their access to transportation, their
Yeah.
access to healthy foods. And so our real estate department works with the real estate team in order to make sure those things are happening. And then the second part of the legal department focuses on litigation and our administrative hearings. And so they work more closely with our families. And a lot of times they're focusing on creating opportunities for our families and children to thrive. They're helping to communicate the impact of Atlanta housing on the work that we do in Atlanta. And so because they have a more direct link with our families, it is an opportunity for them to kind of see some of the specific things that are needed and be able to focus on that with our housing choice units, our housing choice departments. And then my group kind of does everything else. And so we do the employment law, we do ethics, compliance, a lot of the internal things for the agency. And so that allows us to help strengthen Atlanta housing operations. It allows us to help communicate the impact of the work that we do with our families, and then help us to build on those partnerships. So especially
Right.
with the contracting work.
Yeah, and I would imagine the concept of purpose is something that we and our speakers have talked about for many years at the forum, right? I would imagine
Yeah,
the work you're doing
yeah.
is very purposeful because you can see it has, you're helping, folks who are not often represented by lawyers, right? To
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And that work is very near and dear to a lot of the employees that work there,
Hmm.
because regardless of what department you work in, you know that you're directly impacting the families.
Yeah.
So even someone that might be like with my group, because we're more transactional than some of the other
Mhm.
attorneys, even though we are not necessarily touching individuals on a daily basis, we know that the work that we're doing with our contract drafting is helping them. So if we're working with one of the business units to create a contract that allows our families to have a day about learning about a particular development area and how it can be beneficial to them, and making sure
Mhm.
that we have everything in place, even though we're not directly interacting with our families, we know that the work that we're doing in that contracting area is definitely going to help our families. So yeah, it's hard to be a member of the Atlanta housing team without knowing how much you're impacting not just families, but neighborhoods. And
Yeah.
so you feel that every day, for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah, that must be quite gratifying when,
It
the
is.
successes are quite gratifying.
Yes, for sure. It is, definitely.
Yeah. So in terms of the day-to-day, what kinds of challenges, are on the table in a legal department in Atlanta housing, sort of I mean, and what sort of trends do you notice, in recent years, have been sort of cropping up in terms of.
Yeah, well, I will tell you, I mean, this is so perfect as far as the timing, because technology is huge everywhere.
Mhm.
And, just talking about artificial intelligence, it is everywhere and is going to continue to be everywhere. And so I will tell you, for the legal department, that is definitely one of our challenges. As lawyers, we want to make sure that we're providing the best advice possible. We want to ensure that we're being efficient. We want to make sure that we're providing effective advice and counsel. And when you start to rely on technology, it becomes a little scary for lawyers sometimes, because we want to be sure that the advice we're giving is accurate. We want to make sure that it's up to date, and relying on technology just can be a little scary sometimes for lawyers. And so
Mhm.
one of the things that we're focusing on right now as an agency is to ensure that our technology is where we want it to be, to make sure that it is creating the environment that we need for it to create for all the various businesses. And for legal specifically, we're trying to find that software tool that is going to provide support for the various areas that we have. Because as I mentioned, we kind of do it all. And finding a tool that is going to really be helpful for the real estate department or the real estate section of legal is very different than a tool for risk management or for employment. And so right now we have a tool that we're using that manages our matters. It's a matter management tool. And we've been liking that tool, but we also realize that we have some other areas that we need to focus on. And just like with ethics right now, our ethics is still paper, I'm ashamed to say, but we're definitely looking forward to getting a software tool that's going to help us and allow us to be more efficient in managing our ethics and providing training. As far as AI, the legal department has been working with human resources as well as IT because we're trying to figure out how AI needs to work for the agency. And of course, we want to strike a balance between allowing for flexibility, but also being responsible in the work that we do. And so that is an ongoing discussion right now. And then, of course, AI and technology changes so fast. We just want to make sure that we're aware of what's happening now, but also just be cognizant of some of the help that AI can provide when we're doing our work, but being responsible. So we're in discussions now to tackle that area, but AI is definitely on the top of everyone's brain right now and trying to figure out, how that's going to fit into the work that we do.
Does technology play in terms of the end user experience too, right? Because you've probably noticed this in 17 years, across society, writ large, people live on their phones. The notion of government has been, in many jurisdictions, depends where, been a key pillar. At least I've noticed in my interactions with governments, agencies. And so how does that tie into AH's overall, user-focused strategy in terms of connecting with them and providing services to them? And then how is that rolling into how you're thinking about technology in a legal operations sense, which is also, I know, a key area of focus of yours?
Obviously, user satisfaction is extremely important. And then for us, because we work with a wide variety of people in neighborhoods, we have to also be cognizant of our participant experience. And so we want to make sure that we have technology that allows for our participants to interact with us easily. And then, of course, we also have a lot of senior participants as well. And I will tell you that our IT team has done some work with different companies that have come in to specifically focus on training our seniors on how to use technology so that they can interface with the agency more efficiently. And so that's something that we've been doing for a few years now. And I think it's been pretty successful, something that we want to continue to do. I will say again, for legal, I think technology has probably touched us later than in some of the other departments. And so I think our IT does an amazing job of making sure that they're up to date on the latest tools that are out there. They do focus on the user experience, trying to make it easier for employees to be able to use technology. And I will tell you that one of the things that I'm really proud about with our IT department is, when COVID hit, they were able to get us up and running remotely within days. And so we actually, I think we only had, if I'm not mistaken, I think we only had like maybe a day and a half of downtime. But they did an amazing job of making sure that everyone was able to function remotely, that we had access to our system. Since I've been there in the 17 years, I haven't had a lot of downtime, which is really, really quite amazing.
Yeah.
But our IT, I mean, they really stay on top of it, and I'm very happy that we have them working with us to ensure that we have some of the technologies that we do. For the rest of the agency, I think IT does work very closely with the different business units to make sure that we have technology that is specific to what is needed. And then, like I said, for the legal department, I wouldn't say it's an IT issue. It's more so of a legal issue because I think, we tend to like our paper.
Right.
And especially, especially with like the real estate team, real estate is just a different area of law. It is um, very much so like old school practice. And so it is really hard to get away from some of the paper in real estate. But I am pushing and pulling to get the legal team on board with some of the newest technology for legal. I'm glad to have our IT as a partner in that because they have been working with us and we've been working with them just for the agency overall, but our IT has really done a really good job of, trying to make sure that we're aware of some of the latest technologies and helping us to implement them.
Yeah. And so two questions stemming from that. One is sounds like you have a fairly proactive, engaged IT team, which is working with, cross-departmentally at Atlanta Housing. When you're thinking about legal operations and technology plugging into the broader organization's tech stack and ultimately, how it's delivering a better services. Do you have specific strategies sort of how you're road mapping that and how that legal ops strategy aligns with the broader business requirements?
I wish I could say that I did, and I do not. And the reason for that is because, like I said, I feel like technology has kind of reached legal like towards the end. The
Yeah.
rest of the agency, I think, is embracing legal technology. And so I have been, I think, spearheading the legal ops for the agency, for the legal department. And so I think I think we've had our matter management tool for about, I want to say 3 years now, whereas like the rest of the agency, I think has been using different technology for way longer. And so from a legal ops perspective, I am still kind of building that for the legal department. I have a dedicated person who is focusing on legal operations, and I'm slowly bringing some other people to help us build our legal operations so that we are working with IT to actually have a plan for what legal's technology system will look like. Like I said, that's something that our IT, HR, and legal are working on now. We're in discussions for that. And so my hope is that we will develop a plan that's going to work for the legal department. But I will continue to, push for that because I recognize the importance of it. I recognize, especially for legal ops, how much that has become kind of a separate entity from just the legal department. Like
Yeah.
it's its own section of the legal department. And I want to make sure that we make that a focus and that we keep that as a priority as we talk about technology in the legal department. But excuse me, I wish I could say I had a plan, but I promise you, if we talk in the next 6 months, I will have a plan because that
Okay.
is something that I'm definitely going to be speaking to IT and HR when we continue our discussions about technology for the agency as a whole.
Yeah. And how did you come into this role? Like what made you put yourself forward, or were you picked out to run the legal operations side of things?
I think I kind of made myself, not even kind of, I did. I made
Mm.
myself the person that focuses on legal ops. And it came from my love for processes. Like I
Mm-hmm.
love to have processes and procedures. I like to have them documented. I like things to be in order. And so I want to say about maybe 4 years ago, possibly five, but at least 4 years ago, I started working with my paralegal, and we
Mm-hmm.
started looking at some of the information about legal operations, how it is helpful in managing technology for legal, how it is helpful in telling your story. Because I think
Mm-hmm.
that at that time, that was one of the big things that a lot of legal departments were talking about is how do you tell your story so
Mm-hmm.
that your board, so that your senior leadership really understand the value of an in-house department.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of how I really got into it, is just really wanting to be able to tell the story of the work that we do, to be able to show the value of the legal department, and really wanting to focus on processes and how we do things, and making
Yeah.
sure that consistency across the board. So
Yeah.
that's kind of how I got
That's how
started.
you
And
how you yeah. And you've embraced it
yeah,
since.
I have definitely embraced
Yeah.
it, and I'm pulling other people along. So I'm really trying
Yeah.
to get other people to really embrace it and really, really love the idea of having that part of legal be able to, help legal not just be one of the spending business units for a
Mm-hmm.
company, but see them as the value that they are, and being able to apply that, and being able to tell someone the story of, this is what legal does, and this is
Yeah.
how we help. And especially for Atlanta housing, being able to say how we're a part of making our families more sufficient.
Yeah.
That's something that, I really look forward to doing for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. So a couple more things before we wrap up, but it's interesting when you think about, the change management piece is something you've talked about. So obviously it sounds to me like that's a core piece of it. You can have a strategy whether you develop it or on the fly, or you've written it up and you brought the consultants in and have a framework. Either way,
Mhm.
once you've made the decision of what needs to change, change
Mhm.
management is hard. And my second question is that sort of efficiency imperative is different in businesses where the motive is profit. The profit motive is to be more efficient, to spend less money so the company's more profitable, right? And therefore
Right. Yes.
shareholders or the owners of the company are happier because they get more distributions. In this case, it's a different outcome. The
Yeah.
outcome is our social goods, and that's a broad term for basically making people's lives, providing the baseline for people's lives to be much better. As you know, and a real fundamental pillar of that is having a home. So how do you kind of measure that up? Change management in public sector organization, not always that much incentive to change, but the outcomes, in fact, they are absolutely have a greater impact on people's lives directly, which you know can be pretty fundamental to their happiness and their future.
Yeah, there's definitely the obvious difference between the private sector and the public sector, because we're not doing it to make money. But I will tell you that, because I've been there for so long, I've seen a lot of change in the agency, a lot of change in what our focus has been, a lot of change on what our goals have been, how we've approached different things. And the last few years with this 5-year strategic goal, the 6 strategic goals that we have for the next 5 years, I feel like it is probably one of the clearest strategic goals that we've planned for the agency because we're specifically focusing on assisting the mayor in making sure that there are affordable units in the city of Atlanta, and we're specifically targeting creating or preserving 10,000 units. And with technology, we are monitoring that. So we're able to we have dashboards that we're keeping that will tell you in real time where we are in reaching that goal. You know, we're being very intentional about making sure that we're establishing and maintaining partnerships with nonprofits, and we're measuring how those relationships are creating an impact, and we're measuring that with technology. We're making sure that we're able to tell the story of Atlanta housing and the impact that we're having on communities and neighborhoods. And we're measuring that, and we're keeping track of that. And in real time, we're able to show what that impact is. We're able to tell that story. And so over the last year or so with these strategic goals, we've been so purposeful in making sure that we're measuring the impacts, that we're able to show the work that we're doing, whether we're on target, ahead of target, or even behind, we're able to show that in real time because of technology. And that is something that I think for us, instead of looking at whether we're projecting profit, we're looking at how are we projecting as far as the things that we said that we're going to do for our families and for the neighborhoods. And so it's almost the same way that I think a private entity would look at their numbers, and they're tracking that, and they're measuring it, they're monitoring it, they're keeping, just live reports on that. We're doing that with the work that we're doing with our families, and being able to see that, on some of our goals, we're on target or we're ahead of schedule. That keeps us going. And I think because we started doing that with these strategic goals, I think it gives a lot more transparency to the general public on what we're doing, but it also gives transparency to the employees because you see your work impacting the families. And that is such an amazing feeling,
I bet.
And so it is, you're right. It's not earning money for someone else, but it is impacting lives. And that's an amazing thing. And without technology, we wouldn't be able to do that. And we're able to see that. And that is amazing.
Yeah, that is amazing. And going back to the purpose point, I think, there couldn't be a higher purpose than that, could there?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's like, I will tell you, when I worked at the last law firm that I was at, I used to volunteer with United Way a lot.
Okay.
And so much so that my employer gave me a certain amount of hours where I could devote that time to my volunteer work. And that was very satisfying for me. I appreciated my employer for allowing me to do that and seeing the value in that. But at Atlanta Housing, even though I still volunteer, in fact, I have a volunteer opportunity tomorrow morning with United Way. Even though I still volunteer, I could probably not volunteer and still feel like I'm having an even greater impact because of the work that I do with Atlanta Housing. Because it's definitely helping other people, but I know that the work that we do goes beyond just focusing on housing, and that it's just a great feeling. It feels really good.
Yeah, that's amazing. So final kind of closing question is, for lawyers listening in, or people in law school, or interested folks who aren't lawyers, you do have a very, by from what you've said and what you've described as your work, it's a very purpose-led, career you've had, particularly your time in Atlanta housing. So for those in the audience who are searching for purpose-led work in their legal careers, do you have any parting thoughts you could impart upon them about how they could think about how to find their purpose and find purpose in their work and other areas as well?
Yeah, I think finding your purpose is really important, especially in your career, because you spend so much time at work.
Mm-hmm.
And if you could find something that you love to do, it makes your day go by so much easier. But for
Mm-hmm.
those that are specifically wanting to help others directly, I feel like as a child, I always knew I wanted to help, but along the way, I was constantly volunteering at different organizations.
Mm-hmm.
And I think if you feel like you're drawn towards a certain thing, whether it's helping the community, helping families, helping individuals, or even something totally different, like you're into technology or you're
Mm-hmm.
into, finance, you love numbers, find things that allow you to do that, whether it's work or not, but find things that allow you to do that. And I think that that will help you to eventually get to a place where your profession is something that allows you to fulfill your purpose.
Mm-hmm.
But there are, if you're really into helping people, there are so many nonprofits out there. There's so
Mm-hmm.
many organizations that work with nonprofits. Seek them out and find out some of the things that they do, and you might find your next career. And it may not
Yeah.
be necessarily, going out into the communities and doing things, but it could be writing
Mm-hmm.
contracts so that,
Mm-hmm.
that company is able to provide some of the services that it needs to provide. So, but I think finding your purpose is huge. I think that's a great thing if you can figure out what your purpose is and then go seek that. Go seek that.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
yeah.
Seek your purpose first, and then find your talents, your respective talents that you can apply to
Yes.
that bigger purpose, whether it's
Absolutely.
contracts, writing contracts, or anything else, right?
Right.
But that's, yeah,
Exactly.
what makes you
Yeah.
tick, find what makes you tick, and then apply your special set of skills that you've, developed over
Yes.
the years. It's a really interesting concept. So Heather, I want to thank you. That was a great conversation. Appreciate you taking your time to speak with us today. Lots covered there, and looking forward to seeing you again in Atlanta soon. We have some events there next year, so certainly involve you with them.
Yes. Thank you so much, Andrew. It's always nice talking to you. And I look forward to the next Legal Innovation Forum because I went to the first one and it was amazing. I had an
Thank you.
amazing time. The conversations were great, and I look forward to many more.
All right. Thanks very
All
much.
right. Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to the Legal Innovation Forum podcast. Stay tuned on our website for the next edition. You can listen to us on all your favorite podcast platforms. Tune in on liforum.co/podcasts.